Thank you, everyone, again, so much for joining us today for our webinar on fall protection. We're really going to be talking and diving into some of the changes in the OC and the ANSI, OSHA and ANSI standards, that have taken place in the past couple of years, what that means for us going forward, and trying to understand how that is going to affect our jobs as safety professionals and folks who are just plain fall protection users. As we start off, for those of you who aren't familiar with Arbel, I'd like to do a little bit of introduction to who we are. Arbel's been providing safety products and services for over 75 years. Our mission is pretty simple. We envision a future in which every employee returns home safely every day. All we do is safety. We are a woman-owned business. We are ISO 9001 certified. We're a GSA contract holder. We are really fully committed to safety and providing safe workplaces for people all around the world. A little about myself. My name is Kate Manis. I am the EHS Services Manager here at Arbel. So I have a particular focus on training and on consulting services that we provide to our clients. I've got going on 25 years experience right now in environmental health and safety. I started off in the public sector, working in biomedical research and institutions of higher education. I spent a good deal of time working in the oil and gas industry. And, I've been with Arbel actually 2 years. Today is my anniversary, my second anniversary with Arbel. So it's been just a joy to be here and to help provide education. And I consider myself a lifetime learner. I hope you do as well. And we've started these webinar series just to kind of keep that spirit of learning going. First, I would like to introduce our first guest speaker today, Steph Tomorrow. Steph is the Global Fall Protection PPE Product Line Manager with MSA. Steph has a degree in industrial engineering as well as an MBA. Her experience with the full product life cycle enables her to guide teams from design to production to post-launch support and customer outreach. So we're really excited to have Steph here today to talk a little bit about how the changes have affected her and what she does within fall protection. So welcome, Steph. And next, I'd like to welcome Ryan LeGrand. He is also with MSA. Ryan is the Global Fall Protection Systems Product Line Manager. Ryan has a background in engineering and new product development. So almost a decade experience, although you wouldn't know it by looking at him, in delivering solutions and helping to keep workers safe. So welcome, Ryan, as well today. And one of the things that we always like to do when we kick off our webinars is talk a little bit about Arbel's safety maturity life cycle. Really, the genesis of this was that we found when we talked to different customers and different clients of varying sizes, we recognized that a lot have difficulty understanding where they are relative to their peers in industry when it comes to safety and where they are in their safety journey. So we've established some guideposts around that, going from standard, where a company recognizes that safety plays an important role, but is still encountering some recurring incidents, through engaged, where a company has, identified some safeguards to put into place and is trying to work to eliminate those recurring incidents. The next step in that cycle would be compliant, where a company understands the standards well, and understands how to apply safety training in order to prevent incidents before they occur. And then beyond that, the next step would be proactive. A proactive organization is one that's established a culture of ownership when it comes to safety, where employees play an active role in ensuring the safety culture is in place and is vibrant, and is always kind of working toward that and continual improvement that we like to see on that safety journey. And then finally, we look at world-class. A world-class organization is one that we would consider a leader in safety performance. They're doing best practices, and they share those best practices with others to model. This is a culture that really empowers their employees to speak up, to stop unsafe work when they see it without repercussions. So we will come back to this safety maturity life cycle at the end of this webinar today, but I want you to think about where your company is, where your organization is as we go through this. Where would you place yourself in this life cycle? And think about maybe some things that you may want to do or need to do to move forward. So a brief agenda for what we'll cover today. We'll start off, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hierarchy of controls, and specifically the hierarchy of controls as it applies to fall protection. We'll also talk about the ABCDs of fall protection. And then Steph's going to come on and she's going to talk about the ANSI 359.14 update and some leading edge products. And then Ryan is going to talk about fixed ladder regulations and the OSHA 1910.28 subpart B update. And then we'll do a Q&A. That way you have an opportunity to ask any questions. But again, as we go through this today, please feel free to drop any questions, any issues that you're having into the chat. That way we can come back to them and make sure we address them in the end. We will also have some polling questions that come up as we go through today. So please help us out and contribute to those polls. It helps us understand where you're coming from and where we need to go to help you out. So starting off with the hierarchy of controls. I know a lot of you are work in the safety world, right? So you've probably seen the hierarchy of controls before or something to this nature, but really, when it comes to preventing incidents and mitigating hazards, we have to have a hierarchy to go through. We have to have an order in which to say, we're going to place this control first. If it doesn't work, then let's try the next thing. That's what the hierarchy of controls does. It starts with the most effective control first and works its way down. So the first control is elimination. So if we can physically remove the hazard, speaking of fall protection, if we were going to remove the hazard of working at heights, the elimination would be if we could maybe take a piece of equipment that we're working on at heights and bring it down to ground level so that we don't have to work at heights. That would be the elimination. Substitution is any chance that we get to replace the hazard with something that's non-hazardous or something that's less hazardous. Following that is engineering controls, anything that we can do to isolate people from the hazard. A lot of times we think about barriers when we think about engineering controls. If that doesn't work and we still have a hazard that we want to deal with, then we get into administrative controls and changing how people work. This can be, changing shift work or only allowing people to work in a certain environment for so many hours during a shift. After all of that is said and done, PPE is our last line of defense, right? This is to protect the worker with personal protective equipment. And a lot of times in our nature is we think, well, isn't PPE first, right? I got to put on my gloves. I've got to put on my hard hat. I've got to put on my steel-toed boots. But really, there's so much about PPE that can go wrong, right? It has to fit the employee. It has to be comfortable so that the employee can wear it. It has to be appropriate to the hazards. And so that's why that is kind of our last line of defense in our hierarchy of controls. But let's talk about specifically the hierarchy of controls when it comes to fall hazards and how we approach from most effective to least effective. And you can find this under the ANSI standard Z359.2. The first step is elimination or substitution, much like our other hierarchy of controls. Then we go to passive fall protection, active fall restraint, then active fall arrest, and then finally administrative controls as that least effective means of preventing or controlling the hazards. To step through these in a little bit more detail, for elimination substitution, again, the most effective approach we can take, we're talking again about moving work to ground level so we don't have to work at heights, redesigning systems so that working at height is not a necessity, or providing, replacing, instead of using a ladder, we provide something that's a more suitable platform, maybe a permanent installation so that we don't have to work at heights. The next step down in effectiveness would be the passive fall protection. So providing guardrails on an open-sided platform, having a scaffold to access height versus a ladder. If you think about passive fall protection, it doesn't require anything of me as the person working at heights. It just does it for me. It's not anything that requires any attention of my own. Then we get into the active fall restraint. So active fall restraint requires me to take part in it, right? I need to use it. It's using a fall restraint systems in this case so that a worker can't reach the edge, can't reach the point to where they might fall. Following that is the active fall arrest. So requiring a personal fall arrest system so that should I happen to approach that leading edge and fall, that my fall is arrested and I don't fall all the way to the ground. And then the very bottom of our effectiveness when we come to controlling fall hazards is our administrative controls we put in place. Things like work rules that state who can and cannot be working at heights. Things like signs and warnings. Employee training is a huge, very important undertaking, but at the end of the day, it is an administrative control and it is not the most effective. It's key and it's a great idea, but it's not the most effective means of controlling that hazard. So I'm going to start off with our first poll of the day. And I'm going to ask you, what are the ABCDs of fall protection? I'm going to wait for that poll to pop up. And the wrong one may have popped up. Well, we'll keep going. The ABCDs of fall protection. I think most of us who've been around a while know the ABCs, and a lot of us also know that we've added the D, right? So the A stands for the anchorage point, right? B is the body harness. C is our connecting device, and D is descent or rescue. We'll talk about each of those in a little bit more detail on the following slides. Anchorage point, most simply, we have to have something to hook onto, right? It could be a structural steel, supporting piping, it could be beam trolley, it could be cross-arm straps, whatever we can connect to that is independent of the worker's own means of support and suspension. That's A. B is our body harness, our full body harness that will distribute fall forces and prevent pressure on the abdomen should we happen to fall. It's also where we're going to connect our bodies to the anchorage point. And then the C is the connecting device. It's what actually connects us, right? Can be shock absorbing devices. It can be self-retracting devices, rope grabs, things of this nature. Those are the ABCs that we're used to seeing when we talk about fall protection. But really important to also add is the D, and that is the descent or the rescue. Rescue plans are imperative anytime we're working at heights. We need to have a rescue plan in place before we work at heights. The reason is because as soon as somebody falls, we have to be able to start rescue immediately. As many of you know, if an individual falls, they can begin to experience suspension trauma. Blood will pool in the legs because of the pressure of the harness. They can become nauseous, they can get dizzy, they can faint, increased heart rate, and if it goes on long enough, it can be fatal. So that's why we have to have plans in place early on to start. It could be self-rescue. If it's a shorter height, for heights under 3 feet, about 90% of protected fall victims are able to rescue themselves, are able to climb up themselves. It can be an assisted self-rescue. So in this example, perhaps a coworker brings by a ladder to help prop that individual up and help them get back to safety. If the person has fallen and is unconscious or has injured themselves during the fall, we might need to do some mechanically aided rescue, where we bring in a mobile elevated working platform like an aerial lift or a scissor lift to try to help that individual and bring them to safety. Now I have another poll. This one is a question. Who dictates fall protection standards, OSHA or ANSI? OSHA, I see you saying OSHA, Robert. Okay. OSHA, yep. What's kind of a trick question? Both. There you go. There you go, Lisa. You got it. It's both, really. You know, OSHA is the statutory authority, right? They're the regulatory gatekeepers. They're the ones who say, this is the law, you must follow it. They enforce those regulations. However, OSHA does recognize that they need to rely on some national consensus standards to help protect worker safety. If you think about it, I don't know if any of you have had to go and renew a passport in the last year or two, but government has the tendency to move at a glacial pace, right? National consensus standards, for example, the ones that ANSI provides, are able to be a little bit more agile, right? They're able to quickly understand what is going on in industry, make changes to their standards, and get those in place in a more quick fashion. So OSHA does rely on ANSI as well as other organizations such as the NFPA and others to have those consensus standards to provide that assistance and support so that OSHA can always be pointing individuals to the most current, the most up-to-date, and the most all-encompassing regulations and standards that there are available out there. You can go to for fall protection, you can go to the OSHA website, just type in fall protection, and you'll see all the standards. OSHA will list all of their own regulations that fall under both the general duty as well as the construction standards, and they'll also list all of the ANSI standards that are applicable as well. With that, now that we're talking about OSHA and ANSI, I am going to turn it over to Steph, who is going to talk about ANSI, the ANSI update, and talk about some leading edge products. But I've got one more poll before she goes. And this is a pretty simple yes or no. Do you operate at heights that involve leading edges? Did anyone run into that? Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us do see that. So Steph, going to ask you to come off of mute and onto camera, and I'll let you take it away.
Sure, thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today talking with you all about the ANSI Z359.14 standard update. For those of you who are not aware, this is the portion of the standard for self-retracting devices. And it has been a huge focus of the fall protection industry over the last couple years and a big topic for manufacturers. So this standard went into effect in August of this year. So now manufacturers are expected to comply with the standard to keep that ANSI certification. So it's a really great time to meet with you all, update you on how it will affect both end users and manufacturers. We also will get into leading edge conversations, like Kate mentioned. This is another big topic in the fall protection industry and something we really want to create more awareness around. So Kate, if you can click 2 more through for me so we can get all the types of SRDs on the screen. Perfect. So one of the first changes to the ANSI standard is how we call the different types of SRLs in fall protection. So the previous version of the standard had 3 types. We still have 3 types, but they work a little bit differently now. In the old standard, you would have seen SRL, SRL-LE, and SRL-R. The SRL type was an overhead-only unit that could be of any length, but it was not approved for leading edge use. On the other hand, the SRL-LE types were rated for leading edge and could be of any length as well. The SRL-R type of SRD is a standard overhead lifeline used for rescue. So in the new standard, that SRL-R type really hasn't changed. The other 2 have changed to move away from leading edge versus non-leading edge, and instead how that SRL is mounted. So the SRL type, it can be standard or leading edge, is a non-back mounted type. And then the SRLP is a personal SRL. So those are the ones that you actually wear the unit on your back. They're usually smaller lengths, and they're that smaller length, so you don't have to carry that weight around. You can move to the next slide. So with all of that said, the types of SRLs, they don't necessarily matter to the end user. We want to create awareness around them because it is a change in this new ANSI standard, but it's not something that you're going to need to look at day to day. Instead, these groupings are really more for the manufacturer, so they know which tests to perform if it's an SRLP type versus a rescue versus a standard overhead SRL. The other portion to this that I would say is definitely more important for the end user is the classification of SRD. So we used to have Class A and Class B, and those original classes really helped to determine the deceleration distance and ultimately how much clearance you needed, which is that space below you when you're working. If you had a really small amount of space below you, you'd typically go with a Class A device because the product would stop you within 24 inches. Your forces might be higher with that type of device, but the event would happen in a much smaller space. If you had more room below you or needed to minimize the force for your anchor points, that's when you would have gone with a Class B device. We found, or the ANSI group found, that way of classifying SRDs was a little bit confusing to end users and maybe not the most helpful. So they've really simplified things with this Class 1 and Class 2 way of classifying the SRLs. Class 1 essentially means that it is a standard overhead product that has to be used above your D-ring. The Class 2 products can be anchored above or below your D-ring and are acceptable for leading edge application. So really, if there's anything that you need to take away from this seminar today or webinar, it is that if you're in a non-leading edge application, it's okay to use Class 1. If you have that risk of going over a leading edge, that's when you would need a Class 2 device. So the next slide will go through a few examples of this new naming convention, combining that type and classification. So the first one seen here is an SRL type Class 1. This is a larger SRL that'll be anchored overhead. You'll be connecting that lifeline to your back rather than the body of the unit. This one could be used for ladder climbing because you would not want to approach a leading edge with a Class 1 device. The SRLP Class 2, this is a back-mounted leading edge device. So this one that we have pictured is 8 feet. You wouldn't go too much longer than probably a 10-foot unit on your back because you'd be carrying that around with you throughout your workday. And then the last one here is an SRL-R Class 1. These are typically a tripod-mounted type SRL used for confined space access. So the key takeaway here If you are in a situation where you have a leading edge, you'll need to use a class 2 device. Otherwise, you can use class 1. And one of the nice things about this standard update is kind of the way that they have required manufacturers to label the products. So now, no matter the manufacturer, when you get an ANSI approved SRL, you will see either a class 1 or a class 2. And again, this is standardized not just in the classification, but also in how it's labeled. So that black and white exact format is what needs to be used on the device. Additionally, ANSI now requires that any class 2 or leading edge devices have to have a clearance chart on the product or in the label pack. So we have a couple of examples of MSA clearance charts here. We know, clearance calculations and clearance charts, they can be very intimidating at first, but really with a few minutes of training, they make a lot of sense. And these newer formats that we're using don't require as much calculation. So that one on the right there, all the user would need to do is say, I'm going to walk from my anchor point 2 feet, have a 2 feet offset, and the anchor point is also 2 feet above my back D-ring. If you follow the graph lines to that point, you'll see you need 8 feet of clearance below you. So it doesn't require any other calculation, any other math on the end user's end, really simplifies things for them. One thing to mention for these clearance charts is while it is required that every manufacturer have them labeled on the class 2 devices, there is not a standardized way of showing it. So each manufacturer will still show clearance charts differently, and you'll need to either read that information on the label or in the user manual to understand how to calculate those clearances. Okay, so the key takeaway here, Class A and Class B are no longer applicable. They're not used to help you determine your clearance. You should instead now refer to your manufacturer's clearance charts to determine your clearance requirements. And then also for your awareness, ANSI now requires that every Class 2 SRL come with this warning card. They have required a certain wording, and what this really does is reminds end users that even though these are class 2 products and they're leading edge, they're not invincible. They're incredibly robust and they have more capabilities than an overhead only unit, but there are still limitations. You still need to read the manual, understand what edge type the product can go over, and any other limitations that there are with the product. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about leading edge, but let's dive a little bit deeper and understand leading edge applications a little further. So the key design component for a leading edge device is that the energy absorption portion needs to be near the body of the user. So on that, I have 2 units up on the screen. On that left unit, this is a larger SRL. That lifeline portion is what would connect to the user, and it would be anchored, the body would be anchored away from them. So that energy absorber is near the user. On the other one, this is a smaller length, that SRLP type that you would wear on your back. And that black case there in this picture is your energy absorber. So it needs to be near your body. And we'll talk about why on the next slide. So in this first scenario, the SRL that is anchored near the wall actually has the energy absorber in the unit. So it is not near the body of the user. In that situation, when the lifeline goes over the edge, it is going to get caught on the edge and cause a lot of friction. And when that happens, the forces in the cable system get really, really high because the braking system can't do its job from where it is anchored at the wall. The forces can get so high here that it can actually break the lifeline and cause a catastrophic event, which is what you see in that second picture. So the industry has really learned a lot about this and really are trying to bring a lot more awareness to leading edge applications and what types of devices you need to wear. So let's take a look at that second scenario on the next slide. So here you see the user has the energy absorber near their body. They go over the edge. There's still going to be a pinch point and it's still going to get caught on the edge. But since that braking system is near the user, it will properly deploy and reduce the forces that that lifeline sees. That means that now the lifeline will not cut on that edge and the user won't feel as much force as they take that fall, as that energy absorber will slowly deploy and reduce those forces. So this is really what makes leading edge products more capable to handle these situations and why it is so important to have that energy absorber near the body of the user. So just to show, can you click one more time, please? So just to show from the manufacturer's standpoint how these leading edge products are tested, they have a couple of additional tests. One is a perpendicular drop test over an edge, and the other is an offset drop test. That offset test will simulate someone walking along the edge of the building, and when they fall, their lifeline is actually going to swing across the edge and rub against it. So we need to make sure when designing these leading edge type SRLs that the lifeline is robust enough to handle this type of a fall. And the last slide I have here on ANSI is some of the behind the scenes new testing that aren't as critical to know as end users, but still something interesting to share with you. So the first one here requires that manufacturers test a one-to-one test mass to user mass correlation. What that essentially means is if a manufacturer is going to say that the product is capable to 310 pounds of body mass and tools and everything, you have to also test to 310 pounds. The next one is for the SRLP class 1 type. This one has added in additional free fall. So where we used to do a dynamic drop test on this type of an SRL, and we had to limit the forces to 1,800 pounds just from a simple drop, we now have to lift that mass, that test mass up to create 6 feet of free fall and still limit the forces to 1,800 pounds. So this was a big change for manufacturers. The next is for an integrated bracket, like you can see in the pictures here. These are starting to get used more on the SRLP type devices. And there was never, or that before in the last ANSI standard, there were not specific tests that manufacturers had to meet. So now there are different loading requirements at all of these orientations for those brackets. And lastly, there are some new misuse tests added also for that SRLP type. So that's where the types come in. That's why it's important more for the manufacturers and the testing that was added. And then one other thing that I want to mention before moving forward that's come up a lot. Now that this new ANSI standard is released, manufacturers have to manufacture to the new ANSI standard. You as end users or safety managers can continue buying and using the products to the old standard until they've reached their end of life. So you don't need to stop using the PPE you've manufactured before the deadline. You don't have to perform any upgrades. You can continue to use your product until it's reached its end of life. This is just a manufacturer deadline. So with that, I think I will pass it off to Ryan then, right, Kate?
Yeah, thank you so much, Steph. Thanks. Let me get Ryan off of mute so that he can share.
I think that worked.
Awesome. Great.
This is why I have Steph go first every time.
Steph is the guinea pig. I see how it is. Well, I've got a poll before you get started.
Sure.
One more. And this is just a poll to anybody. You can drop the answers in the chat there. But how many fixed ladders would you say are at your facility? Or if you have multiple facilities, how many fixed ladders do you think you have? About 6? Yeah. I know Sarah and I were having this discussion earlier. We said, how many is a lot? How many fixed ladders are a lot? Do you think about some of our facilities are really large, right? It can be quite a bit. Yeah, Jim, you have more than 12. Yeah, can be a lot. So this new approach to fixed ladders is really important to a lot of us. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Kate. And first, I just want to say thank you to ARBIL for having us and being a partner in providing solutions that keep workers safe. So today I'm going to go over the compliant fall protection solutions for fixed ladder safety. And before we get into the content, just to reiterate again the hierarchy of fall protection, the first is best practice, and it's to eliminate the risk of any fall hazard. And this can be done again through a variety of measures, including a redesign of the situation through engineered controls. Second is to guard the hazard through collective and preventative measures. And this can again be typically done through guardrails and other means from preventing the worker from reaching the hazard. And then lastly, if the hazard still exists, fall protection equipment to protect the worker in the event of a fall is essential. So in general industry, workers often need access where hazards cannot be eliminated or guarded against. In these situations, fall protection PPE and systems are life-saving solutions that allow for safe access to these sites while maintaining compliance and safety. So today I'm going to focus on compliant safe access solutions for fixed ladders. Okay, and now on to the regulations. So fixed ladder regulations are very specific about what is required for compliance. And up until 2018, cages were considered compliant fall protection for these types of applications. But the data shows, and you can see from ANSI on the screen, that fall protection deaths or fall-related events and fall-related deaths occurred quite often in the US. And so steps were taken to address this through regulation. So OSHA 1910.28, Part B, Section 9, is the part of the OSHA standard, which is US law, that relates to fixed ladders within general industry. And so this final rule came out in 2018, and it's as part of the walking working surfaces regulation. Under this regulation, all new and retrofitted fixed ladders over 24 feet are required to have fall protection systems. And all existing ladders that have cages they have up until 2036 to comply with this rule. So these are for ladders that are over 24 feet above a lower level and that are not equipped with a fall protection system or ladder safety system. I think I see the poll just came up. There's another poll here.
Yeah, it's it seems like this is a really long runway, right, to be compliant. So the question is to everybody, are you prepared for this deadline? Have you started thinking about what you need to do? Do you have a plan that's already in place? Or have you just, are you super ahead of the game and are you already compliant? And you can drop your answers into the chat there.
Okay, so preventing falls from fixed ladders, there are a variety of solutions, which is a good thing. The first is temporary solutions or temporary systems. The two that first come to mind is useful PPE, such as a twin lanyard or a twin PFL. These attach to the user's back D-ring and allow the user to double hook using the carabiners up the ladder. So they're maintaining 100% tie-off using the PPE, and they're able to access the system by moving up the ladder. The rope grab is a temporary system that can be installed to the ladder, and a user then attaches a rope grab device to their chest or sternal D-ring and then is able to ascend the ladder hands-free. Now, there's some good and some bad things about these types of temporary systems. For the lanyards and PFLs, there's no requirement for an installation. The training is relatively simple and straightforward, and they're very budget friendly. PFL and lanyard are going to be much less expensive than some other systems we'll look at. However, some of the downsides are that there's low durability. There's the potential for misuse since the user has to disconnect and connect as they work their way up the ladder. It only allows for one person to access the ladder at a time, and it can be physically challenging having to unhook and hook the way up the ladder, especially for very tall ladders. A rope grab has a lower cost than a fixed system, which we'll look at in a minute. It's versatile. It can be removed from the system, moved to a different ladder if need be, but it does require installation for each use. It has low durability because it's made of rope and synthetic materials. And again, it only allows for one person. So going back to the hierarchy of controls and the ABCDs of fall protection, only having one person on the system does make it challenging for rescue. So a better solution to the temporary systems is a fixed system. And there are a couple different ways we can guard against hazards with fixed systems. The first is self-retracting lanyards, and these can be mounted at the top of the ladder or above the ladder using an extension post. A user can pull down the lifeline with a tether line and attach the connector to the harness back D-ring. A cable and rail lifeline system, these are fixed to the front of the ladder, and a user can attach the cable or rail fall arrestor to the front D-ring and then ascend the ladder hands-free, so they can maintain 4 points of contact as they're working their way up the ladder. So for the SRL, it's simple to install. It just bolts to the top of the ladder. Again, just like the PPE, uncomplicated training of how to use it. It's budget friendly compared to some of the fixed systems. However, it is low durability and high maintenance because it needs to be inspected on a regular basis. It also only, again, allows one person. So again, going back to the rescue and the risk there. And then it requires special mounting brackets for the top of the ladder. For the cable lifeline system, it's a highly versatile system because the cable can adapt to differences in the ladder. It has high durability, especially the models that are made with stainless steel. It's easy to install to existing ladders using a variety of brackets that attach to a variety of different ladder types. It allows for more than one person. Some systems allow up to 3, so you can have multiple users on the system at one time. It does require some upfront installation, but once that installation is complete, then it's ready to use for a long duration of time. For short ladders, it does tend to come at a higher price point. So compared to some of the other systems and solutions we've talked about today, this would be a more expensive option. A rail system, similar to the cable lifeline system, allows for the pre-installation, and it allows for more than one person. But because it's a rigid rail system, it's not as versatile as the cable system. It does, of course, require the installation, and again, can be high in cost in the short and high ladders. So why is a fixed system better than a temporary system? Well, it comes down to 2 things, safety and liability. By installing a fixed system, the risk and the liability that the asset owner has is limited because the owner is now putting in a system that they have permanently attached to the structure and is now being able to provide a solution to anyone who's accessing that ladder. So one of the unique things about a cable lifeline system is that they can come in kits. And these kits are easy to install. They can be attached to a variety of different ladder types. They come in multiple different lengths and some spanning hundreds of feet. And then there are some versions that are available with and without a top extension post. So if a ladder extends above a platform or you need access to, say, a roof, these extension posts allow you to climb past the top of the ladder and onto the platform. Now, of course, these lifelines don't come with the ladder within them, and also a fall arrest device that works with that cable system needs to be purchased separately. Now, the benefits of a kit is that it allows for hands-free climbing. And when selecting one, it's important to look for ones that don't require any manipulation of the cable. Another thing to look for when you're looking for a kit is whether you need the extension post, and then what are the quality of the materials? Is it stainless steel or galvanized? So the unique thing about kits is that they are versatile and can be installed to a lot of different ladder types. You can see in the picture that some of these universal brackets allow for diamond, square, and round rungs. And when you're looking and selecting a kit, it's important to look for, in the US, the ANSI Z359.16 standard. So going back to what Steph talked about, for ANSI, this is a manufacturing standard that shows that it meets the highest quality of industry accepted performance. Now, if you come across a situation where your ladder is unique, it has some challenges, and a kit is not the best fit, then what you're going to need is an engineered system. So work with an approved installer to design and develop a customized engineered fall protection system for your unique ladder situation. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kate.
Thanks, Ryan. That was all really good information from you and stuff today. And it's really, really helps, I think, some of us folks who aren't as ingrained into fall protection as you two are to really understand how these standards impact us going forward. So I appreciate your help today. So in conclusion, as with all safe work practices, fall protection is going to require that application of the hierarchy of controls. That's how we're going to protect our workers in the end, is by looking at how we can control the hazards in the most effective ways possible. Those new ANSI standards refine the definitions for SRLs and update some of those new testing requirements, again, really focused on the manufacturers, but also good to know for us moving forward as users, what we can expect with the future, iterations of some of these devices. As well as, those changes to the OSHA regulations. Again, we have that long runway. We have until 2036 to make those changes and get those into place. But for those of you who said you have more than 12 fixed ladders on site, it's going to take a little bit of time to think about that. Where are we going to prepare this? How are we going to stage out these changes? So all really great information to go forward and help ensure that we not only maintain compliance with regulations and standards, but also we're doing the best we can to protect our workers. So with that, if anybody has added any questions to the chat, I'll get Sari to help me navigate to any of those questions. Does anybody have anything that they've added?
Kate, I do see one in the chat about whether inspection sheets are still necessary to keep with the ladder. To my knowledge, there's not a requirement for the sheet to be kept, but inspection is necessary of the ladder and the ladder system at the manufacturer's recommended interval, and then also as the work dictates. So it might need to be inspected more frequently if it's necessary.
Excellent.
And certainly keeping the documentation is best practice in case an audit were to show or to require any sort of additional inspection.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions? Okay, well, again, if you have any questions that come up, you can actually come back to this chat again. I believe it'll send it to all of us, or you can reach out to Arbil or to Steph and Ryan and ask those questions. We'll be certain to try to help you navigate those changes as they come. Now, coming back full circle, when we talked at the beginning about our safety and maturity life cycle, and I asked you to kind of keep that open and keep that in mind as we did the training, this webinar this afternoon. And we had our final poll, which was to ask, where would you consider your company or your organization when it comes to the safety maturity life cycle? And I'm so excited to see that a third of you have said that you would consider yourselves proactive, and another 20% has said that you consider your organizations world-class, and that is amazing. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear that we have, individuals and organizations that are so invested in safety, that we're really taking that extra step and going just a little bit further, going beyond compliance and moving into those areas where we can be, the best standard example that we can share with others in our industry. If you have any questions, if you want to know a little bit more about the safety maturity life cycle, if you kind of like what you've heard and you're curious about what you can do to move forward, ARBIL would love to help you with that. For over 75 years, like I said, we have been doing nothing but safety. That's our whole entire focus. You'll see a QR code on the screen there. Feel free to zap that with your phone if you would like to schedule a complimentary strategy with myself and some of our other colleagues to learn more about our approach. ARBIL takes a holistic approach. It's not just PPE, it's not just services and training, but we look at it holistically and what we can do to help you move forward and approach world class and meet your safety goals. Real quick here at the end, we want to make sure that we address any safety concerns that you have. So if you have any ideas for future webinars, please go ahead and put those ideas into the chat or feel free to send them to me outside of this meeting. We want to make sure that we're continuing to deliver content that is important to you and is meaningful. So if you have any ideas, go ahead and drop those into the chat. I do want to mention that we do have our next webinar already scheduled for October 11th. It'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be on the science of fit. So finally, one last thing I would like to ask you to do, and hopefully I have this copied. I do not. Okay. Sari, if you could, do me a favor and drop into the chat the survey. So we are going to ask you to please help us out. We really rely on feedback to not only improve the quality of webinars that we're delivering, but to improve the content, to give you some making sure that we're giving you some value for the time that you're investing with us for these webinars. So please, if you'll see there in the chat, Sari just dropped in the link to the survey. I promise you it's not 1,000 questions. It's really brief. And any feedback that you can give us will be taken to heart, and we'll be glad to take that and ensure that we provide you a meaningful product moving forward. And with that, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope to see you on October 11th for our webinar on the science of fit, and then to also see you in future webinars. Thank you so much and have a safe day.